And now, conference, I'm going to make my chair's address, introducing myself, because that's the safest way that we can do it. So I will say good morning again, members and guests. I'm giving my second chair's address at Napo's very first virtual AGM. This time last year, I spoke to you about the end of the CRC contracts and the transfer of probation case management work to the MPS. I promised you then that we would continue our campaign to reunify the probation system, and I want to take a few moments today to reflect on our progress and where we go next. But this year has been an extraordinary year in many ways, and I also want to talk a little about how we as a union and as professionals have responded to the global pandemic. Obviously, we aren't all in Eastbourne this year, and the decision to change our AGM to an online event was a really tricky one. But all the signs were there that even if the restrictions had not had to be tightened to control the spread of the virus, we wouldn't have been able to gather several hundred people together in one place. One of the things that makes Napo so special is that all members can attend our AGM. We wanted to make sure, above all, that we kept to this principle, whatever plans we put in place. In discussions with the AGM team, the officers and the NEC, we agreed that our options were either to cancel AGM altogether or to hold the event fully virtually. As you can tell, we opted for the latter, and so began the enormous task of fitting a year's worth of event planning into a couple of months. We have tried to include all of the elements of AGM. There is the ability to ask questions and hold Napo accountable, the ability to debate and vote on motions, and the ability to attend professional sessions and fringe meetings. We have included more fringe meetings this year with some less structured sessions to allow for networking with members with shared interests. There are also discussion forums for you to interact with other attendees, and on registration, you'll have been asked to give some details to assist other attendees in making contact with you. We've even managed to put on some virtual entertainment, including our friends from the Cuba Solidarity campaign with the salsa class and cocktail and mocktail making session, and a DJ set by Huey Morgan from the Fun-Loving Criminals, which reflects both our victory over TR this year and also Black History Month. We have virtual stalls, and although you might not be able to pick up those all-important free pens, I'm sure you'll find something of interest there. I really hope you'll manage to enjoy all of AGM, and I look forward to being able to hold our event in person next time. AGM is not the only activity affected by the pandemic. Napo went into lockdown before the government announcement, recognising that it would be risky to gather people from all over England, Wales and Northern Ireland for meetings, and that our small office space did not easily lend itself to keeping everyone safe. That does not mean we have stopped working, though. We have held meetings throughout the last 7 months virtually and have, as we learned, even managed to put on extra events for members using those virtual platforms. The work of Napo reps hasn't stopped either, and we have mobilised dedicated training for those involved in health and safety work and held briefings and seminars to support the vital work being done across the union. In future, we want to continue to put on more events for members, and we'll be working to bring together members in the networks and form more networks so that members have more ways to engage on the basis of union or professional topics. Today and tomorrow, you can join networking sessions for campaigning, for members working with people who've committed sexual offences, for members working in courts, for LGBT plus members, for the Napo Black Network, for members working in prisons and for manager members. We must do whatever we can to learn from the crisis we are facing and increase the opportunities for members while keeping our costs low. This is one of the great things to come out of lockdown. In our professions, we've also faced a rapid adaptation to new ways of working, and this hasn't always been easy. I hardly dare mention the MPS special payment scheme for fear of breaking the internet with the anger that it inspires. I'm pleased to say, however, that we held a meeting earlier this week to assist the employer in looking at lessons learned from the scheme, and you can be absolutely sure that all of the views you have expressed about the overtime scheme, the special circumstances payments, and the annual leave buyback were shared openly and frankly. Of course, we took a solution-focused approach and made some suggestions about how the employer can do things differently if they launch such a policy in future. From ensuring that there is no discrimination arising from their plans, to defining terms like offender-facing in advance, to getting the guidance ready before the launch. I'm pleased to say all of our suggestions were gratefully received. In workplaces all across England, Wales and Northern Ireland, our reps have been fighting to keep members safe. There is so much more to do. In the last 2 weeks, we have set up a new line of escalation with MPS for COVID-related recovery issues that cannot be resolved within the regions. And in CAFCAS and the Probation Board of Northern Ireland, reps have worked closely with the employer side on risk assessments and recovery plans as workplaces begin to reopen. In the last few weeks, we have been raising some serious concerns about some prisons where our members felt unsafe for a whole variety of reasons, some not even related to COVID. Our health and safety reps, branch reps, and officers and officials have worked to ensure that all the MPS staff know that wherever they are based, the MPS guidance applies to them. The advice from MPS remains that where work can be done at home, it should be. But can is an important word here. Sometimes a task is possible to carry out at home, but someone's individual circumstances mean that it isn't practical or perhaps not even safe. In those cases, even though in theory the task might be done at home, it can't be. The MPS guidance on hygiene and PPE also establishes the standards for 2 metre social distancing and where PPE is required, as well as minimum standards for hygiene. This applies in any workplace, prison, courts, or any other. As we move forward into recovery, or indeed back away from it, we will be working to ensure that members are kept safe in all ways. That means protecting both physical and emotional well-being. The intensity of work for our reps, especially on health and safety related matters, will continue, and we will always need more members to step forward to become a rep. We'll be continuing to seek COVID contacts in workplaces, as well as offering training for both health and safety reps and reps who carry out individual and collective representation and organising in our workplaces. Our members and our employers need us more than ever in these strange and difficult times. Alongside the crucial work on health and safety in a global pandemic, we have continued to pursue some of the ongoing issues that our members are facing. As a result of the MPS E3 programme, a number of roles were downgraded and they are now being reviewed. The first of these was the approved premises residential worker, and following the fresh job evaluation, we are now in discussions with the employer on the implementation of the outcome. There will be a programme of review of all the roles that were appealed during the E3 process over the next few months. In addition, we secured an extension to the E3 pay protection for those members affected by downgrading. This was on the basis that the employer has not upheld their part of the implementation agreement in offering support and advice to those on pay protection to help them to secure a role at their higher grade. This pay protection has now been extended to March 2021 to enable the employer time to provide their promised support. In addition to resolving the issues from the last period of change in probation, we're now working towards the next big change. The reunification of probation was a key goal for us, but we always knew it would be tough. The first task has been to negotiate the staff transfer and protections agreement that will apply to those transferring out of the CRCs next year and to those who've already transferred in Wales. And our General Secretary will be speaking about this tomorrow. Alongside that, we've been in consultation on workforce plans and the reform programme, as HMPPS label it, to make sure that members' views are heard. But our campaign has not stopped. Reunification is not our only goal. We must continue our campaign to achieve all of the other goals for the probation service. A reminder that what we want is a probation service in the public sector and never for profit, but out of the civil service and released from prison. We want a service built on evidence-based practice and one which is rooted in the local community and partnering with local specialist providers. I'm so glad that somebody read some of my articles on this and gave it to HMPPS to use as a model for the first step on the road to repair our once world-leading profession. But I do hope they read past that paragraph and work with us towards the rest of our goals. We have and will continue to take every opportunity we can to influence decision makers and politicians, and will continue to do so, whether through the Justice Union's parliamentary group, giving evidence to the Justice Select Committee, speaking at conferences, or influencing senior leaders. We will use any tool we have to get our message out. Probation is broken, and it will take far more than reunification to fix it. We need to be able to work with our clients in a way that will get results for those clients, offering them the support and the challenge that they need, while at the same time protecting the public. We won't achieve this by filling in forms or tick box checklists. We won't achieve it by entering data across multiple systems. We don't become good practitioners by filling in workbooks and going through basic online learning. Probation staff, our clients, and our partners are the probation system, and we must be allowed to practice in a way that will work best for the person we're working with, based on evidence, not cost. Anyone working in probation today will know that there is too much work and far too few staff. HMPPS promised 1,000 new frontline staff next year, but existing staff are struggling to support new colleagues to develop into their roles. More recruitment to the training programme means more PTAs are required, but potential PTAs aren't sitting in a cupboard somewhere. They are working hard as probation officers with massive caseloads. Creating the capacity to do the role of the PTA in training, developing and managing new recruits is a bigger challenge than the recruitment itself. Meanwhile, in CRCs, members face another assignment process, this time to either the MPS or the dynamic framework providers of specialist services like accommodation, ETE and women's support services. All the signs are that the numbers assigned to the dynamic framework are very low, but there is work ongoing with appeals to make sure that the legislation is complied with. Where 50% or more of your work is moving, you will move with it, either to the dynamic framework or the MPS. We can be both hopeful that the reform programme will bring us closer to achieving the remaining goals and also sceptical about it. That is what makes us great as professionals. We can hold on to the hope while always being mindful of the risk of failure. While probation in England and Wales is rebuilt and reformed, our sisters and brothers in Northern Ireland face similar challenges around the pandemic and fight a similar battle on pay and on workloads. Our sisters and brothers in CAFCAS are also facing a complete collapse of the system as their workloads are at the highest they've ever been, and the backlog in family court cases, coupled with the expected spike in referrals triggered by circumstances relating to the pandemic, has meant that emergency measures are now being used to manage workload. We are campaigning for additional resource for CAFCAS to address this. And our Vice Chair CAFCAS, Nicola Ebong-Taylor, is working with the employers to ensure that our campaign supports their efforts to secure the funding that they so desperately need. The last topic I want to speak to you about today is change in Napo. I've already described how we have adapted to the pandemic, but we also need to adapt to changing times. Our search for premises to purchase is ever more hopeful, and we've recently reported to NEC reps that an offer has been made on a new home for Napo, which will reduce our ongoing rental costs. We can't give any more detail at the moment, and we will update members as soon as we are able to. We've also made some staffing changes following Dean Rogers' departure and have given temporary opportunities for progression to existing staff to ensure that all of the work is covered. Last year, we reported that we'd taken on a temporary admin assistant to provide much needed cover, and I'm pleased to say that as part of a string of temporary appointments, he has remained with us, again on a temporary basis, in a new role as administrator to the General Secretary and to NEC. We've worked really hard to review the budget for 2020 as we went through the year, and we've made significant in-year savings. These will be reported to next year's AGM. NEC will soon be setting the budget for 2021, which we're currently working on, and we expect to be far closer to a balanced budget thanks to everyone adopting new ways of working. In the summer, around the time of the announcement about reunification, we began a consultation by inviting the chair or an exec member from each branch to a meeting to discuss branch structures for probation branches in England and Wales. Our current branch structure mirrors the CRC contracts, which will end in June and have no further relevance. The MPS has already adopted the regional structure to support the transfer of staff and to enable regional management of the dynamic framework contracts. The region will therefore become the new unit of measure for probation. Some of our current branches cut across those regional boundaries, and we've already had to move some members from East Coast to East Midlands branch because of the difficulties in representing members collectively across regional borders. To consider the future, we reflected on the past. And following feedback from that meeting, we put a proposal to NEC to change the branch structure to once again mirror the employer's organisation. This is what we had prior to TR. One branch per probation trust to enable engagement at every level within one branch, developing positive working relationships and getting results for members. At the NEC meeting, we debated the proposal, and while there were understandable concerns about change, we assured reps that we will work with the branches and support what needs to be done, creating a toolkit to assist them along with tools like a model branch constitution. NEC reps voted to adopt the proposal, and we convened a further meeting of NEC to consider the constitutional amendments that are before you at this AGM. Our aim in proposing these changes is to make it easier for branches to represent members on an individual and collective level, and to ensure that as many reps as possible are involved and engaged in the work that needs to be done. The officers and officials will, after June, be able to work far more closely with branch teams to support their work and their goals. And when we resume our branch reps training in the new year, we'll seek to support new activism right across our union. Trade unions have never been so important in our working lives. We must improve and develop Napo for ourselves, for our profession, and for our future colleagues. I am now entering my final term as National Officer and will be standing down at AGM in 2022. I know that there are reps doing incredible work in Napo branches, but do not forget that we also need national officers, and one day you could be addressing AGM, trying to fit a whole year's worth of work into a 15-minute speech. Being chair of Napo is the most amazing privilege and honour. It is also hard work, and at times terrifying. But we all work in professions that are the same, an honour and a privilege, but hard work and at times scary. Please get in touch if you want to do more in Napo. We will all do our best to help you. Thank you, AGM.